We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the CashFlowPro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of CashFlowPro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Justin Moy of Perpetual Wealth Capital. Justin, how are you today?
Casey, I'm doing fantastic, my friend. How about yourself?
Awesome, man. Doing great. I was elated to hear you say you love to talk, because that makes two of us. And with two people that love to talk, who knows? So we'll try to give the listeners what they're here for. And hopefully we can learn a little bit more about you, your company, what you all do, and then maybe get some insight into what asset classes you're looking at and where you're at now. So Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got started, and then what leads us to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, my real estate journey started essentially right when I graduated high school. So I don't come from a real estate family. My family's sight on investments and careers are actually very, very, very safe. And to their knowledge, real estate was very risky. So they've actually always told me, hey, don't go into real estate. My uncle had like one rental property, and it was like the worst tenant horror story ever, where they poured concrete down the drains and then they threw acid all over the walls. And so to me, that was my only story ever of real estate investing. So I was like, oh my God, why would anybody
Concrete in the drains, though?
concrete
What
in the
in the...
drains? Yep. And so to me, just the worst nightmare that you could do. So I never wanted to get involved in real estate investing. But here's how I came into real estate is, Casey, I don't know about you, but I was terrible at school. In high school, I was the worst.
Awful.
Barely scooched by. Retook a couple classes, ended up getting a couple of nudges from my teachers out the door my senior year, like, yeah, you're gonna graduate, which kind of makes me feel like I didn't really pass, but they were doing me a solid, So I hated school.
Yeah.
But my parents, being kind of from that generation, had always told me, hey, go to college. None of my parents went to college. And because of that, they've always felt very limited in their professional options.
Sure.
And so I dragged my feet through, a couple years of junior college, but I was always looking for a way out. And I was always thinking to myself, well, how can I make good money without a college degree? And I was always really good at sales, just retail sales. I worked at sports stores. I worked at nutritional supplemental stores. I was always like the number one salesperson in like the country. I didn't even know I was that good at it. And so I thought to myself, well, real estate salespeople make good money. Let me ask a couple of them how they like it, and let me get into that. So I did that. So my very first step into the real estate game was in single family sales in the Bay Area, which at the time was the third or fourth most competitive market in the country. So I was a fresh high school graduate, just got my real estate license, and I started selling homes. Once I started selling homes, I was selling to a lot of investors, and I would crunch the numbers and see how much money they were making and how much money they were projecting to make. And I thought to myself, I got to get on the owner side of this, and I got to stop being so transactional. Because the thing is, as a real estate agent, a couple things: you're transactional, and another thing is you really can't move unless you want to restart your entire book of business.
I was just having the podcast that's going to air a day before this one, 2 days before this one. I just had that exact discussion. Transactional, dude. Transactional.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Transactional, kick it out the door.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the beginning, because at the same time, I needed money. And transactional investment strategies are typically really good ways to make a lot of that money. But in my opinion, it's not something that I wanted to sustain. I wanted to be an owner. And you can't sell homes from anywhere in the world. So I really wanted to have that flexibility to do what I wanted. And so because of that, I started looking into investments. When I crunched the numbers on single family versus multifamily, the numbers and the story and the methodology was so clear. So I jumped in both feet into multifamily. That was about 3 years ago now, and I haven't looked back.
Wow, man, what a story. That's great. And and you were talking about school. I'll never forget. Just I know we're going back here. It's probably not a valuable tip for anybody, but man, I was in English class one time. I was in the ninth grade, and when I finally realized that I just like school just was not for me. I knew I was. I just, man, I knew I could get out and do work and figure it out. And I even went to college and got a degree, man, but I hated every minute of it. Hung over in class. I mean, it's just terrible. But
Yeah.
I got good grades. I mean, I didn't fail out or anything, but I just was like, this just sucks. But it was when my
Yep.
teacher in the ninth grade, my English teacher, was trying to teach us what a paradigm was. And I was like, and I realized I was like, this is some BS because like she went like two on for like 2 days about what trying to teach us what a paradigm was. And I was like, get out of here. This is crap. So
Yeah.
anyway,
My
no, it's just
breaking
my
point
little
was
personal.
in literature class when they try to teach us why the drapes were blue in some house and what the author was thinking. I thought, okay, I don't think this is for me anymore.
Yeah.
But yep,
Isn't it funny how we have that one moment where it's just like you're just sitting
yep,
there and like you're so unfocused and so unmotivated because you just don't you can look forward, you can look left, you can look right, you can look behind you, and you don't see a way out of there. Like it's just like, gosh, dang it, other than just
yeah,
time.
yep. And
So
to me, that was when I knew real estate was the thing because that is what lit my fire.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
never knew what that meant. When people said, "Oh, I found my passion," and I always thought it was something like my dad loves to work on cars. And he's
Yep.
like, "Yeah, I just love it." That was his passion. I was like, "Man, like what's wrong with me? How come I haven't found that?" I don't
Yep.
like to work with my hands. I don't like trades. I don't like literature. I'm not an artist. Like, what the hell is my thing? And
Yep.
then once I got into real estate, I was like, okay, this is what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, and it keeps moving. It's like one thing that I liked about real estate, if and even from the sales side, when if real estate broker side, is you wake up every day and it's just different. Like every
Yeah.
day is just, you're not getting off the path necessarily, but rather than walking on the right side of the path, you might be walking on the left side. So you're going to the same destination, but you're just every day kind of wake up and it's just looks a little bit different than the day before. So you do away with the ability to get complacent is so different. And then there was the element of like lenders and wanting to wring their necks, and then the elements of blood pressure getting up because some seller is being an asshole, and then the element of some buyer going out and buying a car a week before closing, and
Yep.
now you've got to navigate those waters. So it was always something different. But
Yep.
anyway, but I love the fact that you put the term transactional on it because
Mhm.
that's been like what I preach. I'm like, dude, listen, if I go out and I have a deal and I'm scheduled and I'm scheduled to make $1 billion commission, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to spend that $1 billion commission. End of story. I go out
Mhm.
and I'm going to make $1,000 commission. You know what? I'm going to spend that $1,000 commission.
Yeah.
That's all of a sudden going to be the level of my lifestyle is going to automatically acclimate to whatever I have on the books.
Yeah.
And so once I realized, I was like, dude, this is crap. What's going on here?
Mhm.
And
And it's tough because you can't keep up. I mean, you can't
that's
keep up.
sorry
There's
about
always
that.
more. There's always something else. I was never off
That's
the clock because I was always thinking, "Am I missing the listing? Am I missing the deal?" And so
yeah.
I totally agree. Totally
And the
agree.
thing is that I spent so much time chasing little money that the big money was elsewhere. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like I like and the thing is that I don't the big lump money, I don't want the lump money. I want if I get the lump money, I'm gonna invest it in and create the passive income stream
Yeah.
because then your income is forever. So
Mhm.
but anyway, it's awfully interesting to hear that side. So what are we doing right now? What does perpetual wealth capital look like? And then and what just tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, so we do apartment syndications right now, and we only focus on apartments right now. And
Okay.
so we raise capital to purchase apartment buildings, value add apartment buildings throughout the Midwest. We fix them up, and then we refinance them and hold them, or sometimes we'll sell them depending on the market. But we're just like you. I mean, we like to have that cash flow play. We like to have a certain amount of our income coming from that cash flow. and we're not doing really those big flips. Because like you said, that big chunk money it's good, and some investors do really like that, and sometimes even we like that, but we like to have that play where we know this is going to build our long-term wealth. A lot of our investors right now, they don't really need that big chunk of cash. They want to build something, and they want a little bit extra security. They want a little bit more freedom that comes with that cash flow and those passive investments. So we syndicate throughout the Midwest now. As a lead GP, just about 200 units that I've done as the lead. And then I've been involved in close to 900 units at this point, in some active capacity that's not counting limited partnerships as well. So it's been a really, really awesome journey, and I've loved honestly every single day of it.
Wow, man, that's great. That's great. So I was taking some notes here, trying to make sure we get all of this stuff down. So, where you're, so you said, in the recording kind of broke up a little bit, but I want to
Mhm.
hear a little bit more about the Midwest stuff. What
Yeah.
cities?
Yeah. So we really like Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and even some areas in St. Louis County. Now, St. Louis County is very,
I
very,
knew
very
you were going to say
spotty.
Kansas City, dude. Kansas City's so damn hot right now, or has been. This interest
Hmm.
rate stuff might have put a little damper on it, but man, I don't know. I mean, I've been to Kansas City. It's a beautiful place, but my gosh,
Yeah.
I never
It's
imagined everybody in the world would want to move there at one time.
it seems it's so interesting because it's an enormous place, and I love Kansas City just like you. I've been there a couple times before we started buying there, and I was just like, man, I really like this city. I don't know why it's not more popular. Like, right now I think Columbus is kind of the big, quote unquote next place up, because there's some tech companies booming there. I've been to Columbus too, and I was like, I hate this place. So I really agree. I think Kansas City, it's busy, but I think it's a little bit more slept on than some of the other towns. Um,
Well, and I often talk about Colorado Springs and Denver.
mhm.
Those, that's because I'm from Colorado Springs. I was raised in Colorado Springs, rather,
Yeah,
and the the Colorado Springs basically has the ability to grow infinitely.
yeah,
Okay, I mean, what used to be way out east is now, it's all part of like one big conglomerate, right?
hmm,
And I feel like Kansas City is somewhat the same way. It's bordered on the east by Missouri and
yeah,
the mountain, the foothill kind of stuff that goes that way. But looking back west, man, Kansas City almost has the ability to grow infinitely in a way,
yeah,
with very little restriction. And so
hmm,
I think every time that they, and like you said, being slept on is pretty much the right term for that, because it wasn't until like 6 months ago, dude, Kansas City was even something I would hear.
yeah.
Like, you just didn't. And as long as, like, I can't stand the Chiefs. The Chiefs are like my nemesis.
Me too.
So
Too actually.
that's why I'm like, yeah, if it's not Denver Bronco football, it's nothing to me. No matter how many Mahomeses you have. So, but anyway, so what does it look like when we start talking about, um, where we're headed? Like, because multifamily is something that right now I feel like is,
Hmm.
you know, I've even heard some guys talk about negative cap rates. And
Yeah.
obviously the negative cap rate is buying purely for appreciation,
Hmm.
but it's tough to imagine buying an asset in an asset class that starts out. So are we talking B and C? And maybe you said it when the video broke up a little bit, but what are we looking at as far as that goes?
Yeah, we look for B and C, and the way that we see it is we do typically some pretty heavy value add on it because we want to achieve that yield. Now we look for a stabilized cash return. So we understand that sometimes that first year we may have very minimal cash flow, or we might even just hold it for reserves. But we're looking to stabilize into a certain cash flow because, like you said, we're just not going to play that game of negative cap rates. We're not going to buy a 2, a 3, a 4 cap, like stabilized. So we need to be able to put in some lift and then achieve that 5.5 to 6%, which continues to grow on a conservative basis in terms of cash flow. And so to get that, you got to be able to get your hands dirty because, yeah, buying at that 7 cap and that 6 cap in a major city at least, those are not the case. To get those, you got to go out to places that you've never heard of before, Miami, Kansas, and things like that, where you could get a little bit more cash flow. But if you want to be somewhere in a growth market with with some cash flow abilities and potential, yeah, you're gonna have to get your hands dirty for sure.
Yeah, in the whole value add life is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Tough, especially with especially remodeling. Now,
Yeah.
I find it interesting. You talk about going to some places you've never heard of, because the big talk at all these conferences that I go to and stuff is the tertiary market, which basically is in my opinion, is if you drew a circle around these major markets: Kansas City, Denver, Nashville, Philadelphia. You
Yeah.
drew your circles around the big one. Then you go out one more notch, then you start getting into some of your tertiary, what they call, I think that's like a fancy word
Mm-hmm.
anyway, tertiary markets.
Yeah.
And I think that's because the thing is that there's always going to be an element of people that don't want the hustle and bustle and whatever else you want to call it of the inner city stuff,
Yeah.
the taking 2 hours to get to work because you're 6 miles from work and it takes 2 hours to get there. There's always those people that don't want that crap.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, let's go outside.
Mm-hmm. And then that becomes then that place gets condensed, and then they got to go outside a little bit more, and then they go a little bit more.
Yep.
And so it's so interesting because if you look at like a map of population in America, and I forgot, there's this one account I think on Instagram that comes up every now and then, and it's just called like Cool Maps or something like that, and it will say like it'll highlight the map of America. One shade is like blue, another shade is red. It's not political, and it'll say the same amount of people live in these blue counties that live in these red counties, and it's enormous. I mean, statistically
Yep.
speaking, most of the country lives in very, very, very condensed areas, and
Yep.
pricing and lifestyle beats them up. It totally
That's
beats them
right.
up. I grew up in the Bay Area, and it beat me up. I hate it.
Whew.
I go back there to visit family
Golly.
at least once a year. Every single year, the traffic is worse. Every single year, it's more expensive, and my parents aren't getting 8, 9, 10% raises every year. So
No.
there's a breaking point there, and they're going to have to go out and continue pushing out. So, yeah, I know a lot of people, especially international money, has gotten comfortable with secondary and tertiary markets. The loose kind of rule of thumb for international investors, like those big wig investors, was they wouldn't invest
Yep.
in a city unless it had a basketball team, a football team, and one other, baseball or hockey or some other team. Three professional teams is like the loose requirement. And now they're like, forget it. I'm not buying a negative cap rate just because the Niners play there. I want some cash. I want some yield. So
Yep.
yes, a lot of investors are kind of loosening that because they're realizing too that other people will live here and they love it here.
Yep.
And when they love it here in these secondary tertiary markets, there's not as much competition. There's not 2,000 new units getting built next year that you have to compete with now. So there are some benefits to kind of pushing out of those boundaries as well, for sure.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the CashFlowPro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making CashFlowPro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
Yeah. And man, the Bay Area, dude. Whew.
I wouldn't recommend
I
it
remember,
personally, but
well, back to the school discussion, whenever I graduated high school, I looked at going to Santa Barbara. I was going to go to Santa Barbara, me and a buddy of mine. And we were basically dumbasses. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't have a clue, right? So we're going and looking at like this basement apartment that stunk to high heaven. 1 bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and a living room. And we're 18 years old, right? We have no income, nothing. We have a little bit of our parents. Our parents want to somewhat facilitate this in a way, but not anywhere near what it was going to take. Now, so there's 2 of us, right?
yeah.
Rent was like $2,800 a month, Santa Barbara. This is 2001.
Jeez.
$2,800 a month for this
For nothing.
crap. For like we might as well have, we'd have had better luck sleeping on the park bench outside. I mean, truthfully. But at the same time, they were going to get that. They were going to get that eventually.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work for us. But I mean, when we're looking at $1,400 a month, I mean, and you're talking about two college students having zero income.
Yep.
I want to do this, but zero income.
And it's interesting because there was a study about essentially the somebody had found that some of the migration numbers for population in areas were not meeting the absorption numbers. Meaning, hey, if they're saying very simple numbers, 1,000 new people net will move into this city or this county or whatever next month. Net, a
Yeah.
1,000 new people. Okay, well, you should expect where are those 1,000 people going to live? We need 1,000 more units of living, homes, apartments, whatever the case may be. And what they were finding was that wasn't happening by a long shot, by like a lot. So of course, 1,000 people, you'll have some of those are families, some of those are going to get roommates or whatever. But it wasn't even close. It was something like 200 units of absorption or something crazy like that. So they're saying, well, where the hell are these other 1,000 people, these 800 people going? And they're finding that they were just doubling and tripling and quadrupling up. So just like you, so they're looking for those garages and they're living in someone's garage. And now instead of a 2-bedroom has 4 people, 2 people per bedroom, and they got freaking bunk beds now. So yes, people are still moving there, but I thought that was really interesting because that doesn't mean just because they're moving there that the demand is going to continue to shoot up because people just can't afford it. They need to move there because of their
That's
job, but they just can't afford it or they don't want to. So now they have to go look for a roommate. And now that's multiple people living in one unit. And so the migration isn't always exactly going to match the absorption of the demand rate for that place.
Well, and then what about the migration of those people out? Like you mentioned they move there because of their job. Well, something happens to that job or that job becomes like what we're doing today, digital,
Yeah.
the ability to be on a Zoom meeting or whatever. And then because this is real widely accepted in our society and that's thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
But those people could potentially be ready to leave as fast as they went in.
Yeah. And that's what they saw too, because that's what they were seeing. The huge major metropolitans after COVID, when people were remote. Okay, yeah, you could have the 6-figure San Francisco job, but not be living paycheck to paycheck, which is crazy. Statistically speaking, most people who are making 6 figures now are still living paycheck to paycheck for 2 reasons. One, because 6 figures isn't what it used to be. So when we were growing up and we thought, hey, the holy grail of income was 6 figures, really due to inflation, that number to make 6 figures back in like the early 2000s, I think it's like $140,000 a year in today's money. So that's one reason.
Wow.
And the second reason is that you just can't afford to live there anymore. If you're making 6 figures in San Francisco, yeah, you're living paycheck to paycheck. You might need a payday loan. It's ridiculous. So yes, that migration out has impacted a lot of those communities as well, kind of what we call primary markets, where there's those negative cap rates because they know like, hey, this will probably continue to appreciate. But again, like that's just not the play that we want to do. We don't want to bank on that happening.
Sure. Yeah. So where do you envision, and maybe we've kind of covered this a little bit, at least from a high level, but where do you envision this multifamily thing going in the next, say, 6 months or 12 months?
Well, we know rates are going to continue to rise. Now, typically with recessions looming over us, the same thing happens, right? The market gets too hot. The Fed recognizes that inflation starts to run rampant. They raise rates to slow down inflation. Inflation doesn't slow down, not because raising rates doesn't work, but because there's usually a 6 to 12 month lag between raising rates and seeing the impacts. But the Fed doesn't really recognize that, or they're under pressure from people, so they continue raising. Then we start to see that lag transpire. But at this point, they've over-raised rates, and now they have to bring rates back down. So after...
Man, I tell you, I never did understand that either. Like you and I and everybody else, particularly in this space, just because these are my people and this is who I congregate with, right? But I had to assume that it was even more widespread than just our industry. But we were all sitting there, like, say, 8-10 months ago. Like people were coming in and buying houses and getting like a 2.5 or 3% interest rate.
Yeah, that's free money.
And we're sitting there and I'm going, all right, guys, hey, why couldn't we go up a quarter? And then maybe next month we go up another quarter.
Yeah.
And then maybe next month we go up a 10th or an 8th or whatever. But instead, no, they come in there and they're like, oh, hey, oh, shoot, something we've known for 18 months or 12 months anyway. And they're like, oh, we forgot to do this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just like, come on, guys. And maybe they want that immediate
Well, they want it, and in an
jarring.
ideal world, maybe you even get it, but it just doesn't happen. And I think it's a lot of, I mean, the frustrating part about people in our role is we understand how things truly work, not how the policymakers make them appear, because most of the country doesn't understand it. So if the Fed did come in and say, "Hey, we're raising, by a tenth, now by a quarter, now slowly, like they should," people are going to throw their hands up and go, "What the hell are you doing? Inflation's still at 8,
Yeah.
9%. Jack these things up." And so they're giving into that political pressure, that social pressure, people who don't understand that there's a delay in these and don't understand that you should not just jump rates up immediately. So they're
Yeah.
catering to that. So the people like me and you who understand these things, we're just like, what the hell? Why would you do that?
Yep.
But the same thing happens all the time, right? They overraise them, and then we go into a recession, and then to cure the recession, they have to drop them. So I
Yep.
think there's a lot of divide in the timing of that. I think within 6 months we will be in that official recession period, but I don't think it's going to last too long. I think when it comes to housing,
Well, and recessions are good for the economy, and it's like anything else. I mean, it's almost like if you're a bodybuilder, right? Your rest days are almost as important as your
yeah,
lift days. I mean, and that's the same. It's the same deal. And if people would look at a recession instead of it being it has such a negative connotation
mhm,
to it. Like when you hear the word recession, you're like, I'm out. What? And then, but when in all reality, it's like, hey, let's stop for a minute
yeah,
here. Let's take a breath. Let's get our bearings. Let's figure out what we're doing, and then let's go
yeah.
forward.
And I think the reason why so many people freak out is because generally speaking, a lot of people, at least when they kind of remember and were in the financial mindset, the most recent recession they know was 2008. They didn't live
Yeah.
through.
Well, that was the most
Hit
like
you on the head.
primitive.
Yeah.
That was the biggest one.
Exactly.
There's been soft ones
Exactly.
as we've gone
But if
along.
you really recognize, if you pull up graphs of recessions in America, and usually you'll see these gray vertical lines that go through, a lot of times you'll still see housing prices actually increasing throughout them. They just increase
Yep.
slower.
Yep.
Now, the reason why so many.
Well, they balance it out.
Exactly. And it'll slow
They
down.
balance it out from now
Yep,
back
it'll
to
slow
then.
down.
Yeah.
And so the reason why so many people are, they're flipping over this recession is because they're thinking every recession is like 2008, because that's like the recession. When you think of recession, you think like in our time period, it's 2008, our lifetime. That's the recession. Now, there's a multiple reasons why this is not going to be 2008, but that's just what people remember. So I mean, I still have people saying, "Oh, I'm just waiting for the recession to buy my house." Like, sure, it's not going to get cheaper. They think they're going to get something for pennies on the dollar. You're not.
They're just not. They're not. They don't have that sticker shock. That sticker shock is
Yeah. Yeah.
absorbed.
And they think they're going to be, oh, like so many people are going to be, selling their homes for half price, and I'm going to get such a great deal. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think you're going to have a higher interest rate environment and just homes that are still appreciating just at a more normalized rate. So,
Yep. Yep.
I'm not as concerned over this time period, because it won't be 2008. It just won't.
Awesome. Yep. Yep. All right. Well, listen. Hey, Justin, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here, and we have a couple of questions that we ask every guest that comes on the
Love it.
show. And the first of those questions is, what is the best book that you've either recently read or are currently reading?
Yeah, so this one is not going to be real estate specific, but it's going to be limitless.
That's right.
Limitless.
Okay.
Brain coaching and how to maximize your
Awesome.
brain and your thought, and then your skills like that, your soft and hard skills. First book I've ever read, and it just set my life up on a war path to personal development. So limitless.
Awesome. That's great. All right. What is a dream vacation that you've either taken or hope to take?
Man, my dream is, I had a plan booked for Thailand right before COVID hit, and it was actually, my
Yep.
flight was, I could have still gotten on the flight, but little did I know I wouldn't have been able to come back. So it was even still a debate
Ooh.
of if I should still go on the trip or not. And I had my bags ready to go, and I was asking for people's opinions. Ultimately, thankfully, decided not to go, but that's how close I was to essentially getting stranded in Thailand. But that's still on the horizon, planning it for next year.
Awesome, man. Yeah, there's so many beautiful places in that. Then I'd like the Philippines is one of the places that's on my list. Just I've got some girls that work for me over there, and they're like
Yeah.
family, and So I want to see that whole
Yep.
region is just, to me, it's really
Yeah.
just beautiful. So, well, anyway, all right. Well, Justin, listen, if the listeners heard something that resonated with them today, and they would like to learn more about you or your company, how can they reach out and get in
Yeah.
touch with you?
The best way is through my email. So you can email me at justin@perpetualwealthcapital.com. I also have a free ebook that you can download if you just want some free information about real estate investing. It's called The Definitive Guide to Building Passive Income and Wealth. You can see that at thedefinitiveguidebook.com. I talk about all sorts of real estate investing strategies, multifamily, single family, short-term rentals, the pros and cons of each, returns. I did my best to make it such a robust book. So you can send me an email. You can go to thedefinitiveguidebook.com, whatever's easiest for you and your listeners.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And listeners, if you would head down and please leave us a 5-star review, and also type a review so that others may know what we talk about here on the CashFlow Pro and how it helped you or benefited you. And also, please smash that subscribe button. Remember, with your elbow, your ear, your eye, whatever it takes to get that subscribe button push it so that you can be notified of new episodes as we release them. And again, Justin, thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
CashFlow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.